Marcus Chun sat alone at the old piano in his family's living room. The wooden bench creaked as he moved closer to the keys. Outside, other kids his age were playing basketball or hanging out at the mall, but Marcus was different. He had autism, and the world often felt too loud and too bright for him. The piano was his safe place. Marcus was 17 years old. He had dark hair that always fell into his eyes and wore the same blue hoodie almost every day. His parents, Sarah and David Chun, worried about him sometimes. They saw how other kids at school treated him. They heard the mean comments and saw the strange looks. But when Marcus played piano, everything changed. The piano had been in their house for as long as Marcus could remember. It was old and some of the keys stuck a little. The wood was scratched and the bench wobbled. But to Marcus it was perfect. His fingers knew every key. He could play without even looking. Most kids with autism had trouble with social things. Marcus was no different. He did not like to look people in the eyes. He did not understand jokes. Sometimes he got overwhelmed by loud noises or bright lights. But music made sense to him in a way that nothing else did. When Marcus was 7, his mom Sarah noticed him picking out melodies on the piano. She thought it was cute. She signed him up for piano lessons with Mrs. Rodriguez, an older woman who taught music in their neighborhood. Mrs. Rodriguez had been teaching piano for 30 years. She had seen many students come and go, but Marcus was special. Mrs. Rodriguez remembered the first day Marcus came to her house for lessons. He would not speak to her. He sat on the edge of her piano bench and stared at the floor. She asked him to play something, anything. Marcus placed his small hands on the keys and played a song he had heard on the radio. He played it perfectly. Mrs. Rodriguez had never seen anything like it. Over the years, Marcus learned quickly. He did not need to practice scales like other students. He could hear a piece of music once and play it back. Mrs. Rodriguez started giving him harder and harder pieces. Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, Marcus played them all. But his favorite composer was Franz Liszt. Liszt was a composer from long ago who wrote some of the hardest piano music ever created. His pieces were full of fast runs and difficult jumps. They required strong fingers and perfect timing. Most piano students avoided Liszt until they were much older and more experienced. But Marcus loved the challenge. There was one piece by Liszt that Marcus had been working on for months. It was called La Campanella, which means the little bell in Italian. Piano teachers often called it one of the most difficult pieces ever written. The music jumped all over the keyboard. It required the pianist to play incredibly fast notes while making it sound easy and beautiful. Marcus had heard La Campanella on YouTube one day. He watched a famous pianist perform it at Carnegie Hall. The audience gave the man a standing ovation. Marcus knew right away that he wanted to learn this piece. When he told Mrs. Rodriguez, she looked worried. "Marcus, that piece is very difficult," she said. "Even professional pianists struggle with it. Maybe we should wait a few more years." But Marcus had already made up his mind. He went home that day and started learning the piece by ear. He listened to recordings over and over. He slowed down the video and watched the pianist's fingers. Slowly, he began to figure it out. At first, his parents thought the music sounded terrible. The piece was so fast and complicated that Marcus could only play small sections. His fingers stumbled over the difficult parts, but Marcus did not give up. He practiced every day after school. While other kids were doing homework or watching TV, Marcus was at the piano. Sarah and David tried to understand their son's passion. They were both accountants who knew nothing about classical music. They had grown up listening to pop music on the radio. But they could see how happy music made Marcus. When he played, his whole face changed. He looked peaceful and confident. Mrs. Rodriguez was amazed by Marcus's progress. In just 3 months, he had learned most of La Campanella. The parts that took professional pianists years to master, Marcus was playing with surprising skill. She had never seen a student work so hard on such a difficult piece. One day in February, Mrs. Rodriguez brought Marcus some exciting news. The State Youth Piano Competition was accepting applications. It was a big contest for young pianists from all over the state. The winner would get a scholarship and a chance to perform with the city orchestra. "I think you should enter," Mrs. Rodriguez told Marcus after his lesson. Marcus looked up from the piano keys. He rarely made eye contact, but this time he looked right at her. "With La Campanella?" he asked. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded. "It would be perfect. No one your age has ever attempted that piece in the competition." Marcus thought about it for a moment. He had never performed in front of a large audience before. The biggest crowd he had ever played for was at Mrs. Rodriguez's student recital, and there were only about 20 people there. The state competition would have hundreds of people watching, but Marcus was not worried about the audience. He was excited about the chance to play his favorite piece on a real concert grand piano. He had only ever played on his family's old upright piano and Mrs. Rodriguez's small baby grand. That night at dinner, Marcus told his parents about the competition. Sarah nearly choked on her soup. "A state competition?" she asked. "Marcus, are you sure you're ready for something that big?" David was more practical. "How much does it cost to enter?" Mrs. Rodriguez had already thought of that. The entry fee was $50, which was a lot for the Chun family, but she offered to pay it herself. She believed in Marcus that much. Sarah and David talked about it that night after Marcus went to bed. They were scared for their son. They knew how cruel other kids could be. They worried that Marcus would be made fun of or that he would have a meltdown on stage, but they also knew how much music meant to him. They had watched him grow more confident over the years. The piano had given him something that nothing else could. If this was what he wanted, they would support him. The next day, Marcus filled out the competition application. In the space where it asked for his piece selection, he wrote La Campanella by Franz Liszt in his careful handwriting. Mrs. Rodriguez helped him mail the application that afternoon. A few weeks later, an envelope arrived in the mail. Marcus had been accepted into the state youth piano competition. The date was set for May 15th, just 3 months away. Marcus had 3 months to perfect the most difficult piece he had ever attempted. He was ready for the challenge. What he was not ready for was what would happen when word got out at school. Marcus never meant for anyone at school to find out about the piano competition. He was a quiet student who kept to himself. He ate lunch alone most days and rarely spoke in class unless a teacher called on him. He preferred it that way. Being invisible felt safer, but somehow, word got out. It started on a Monday morning in March. Marcus was putting books in his locker when he heard 2 girls talking behind him. One of them was Jessica Martinez, a popular girl in his grade who had never spoken to him before. "Did you hear about Marcus Chun?" Jessica was saying to her friend. "He entered some big piano contest. My mom saw it in the newspaper." The local newspaper had published a list of all the students from their area who had been accepted into the state competition. Marcus's name was right there in black and white, along with his school and the piece he planned to play. Jessica's friend laughed. "Marcus? The weird kid who never talks to anyone?" "You're kidding." "I'm serious," Jessica said. "It says he's playing some super hard piece by a famous composer, La something." Marcus closed his locker door harder than he meant to. The sound echoed down the hallway. Both girls looked at him and then quickly walked away, whispering to each other. By lunchtime, it seemed like everyone knew. Marcus sat at his usual table in the corner of the cafeteria, trying to eat his sandwich in peace. But he could hear students at nearby tables talking about him. "I bet he'll freeze up on stage," said Tyler Brooks, a boy from Marcus's math class. "Kids like him can't handle pressure." "My sister goes to the music academy downtown," said another student. "She says this competition is super serious. Real musicians compete in it." Why would they let someone like Marcus enter? The comments got worse as the week went on. Someone had looked up La Campanella on YouTube and shared the video on social media. The post said, "This is what the weird kid from our school thinks he can play. LOL. Marcus saw the post when he got home from school. He read through the comments underneath. Most of them were laughing faces and jokes. A few people had written mean things about kids with autism not belonging in music competitions. Marcus showed the post to his parents that night. Sarah's face turned red with anger. "Those kids don't know what they're talking about," she said. "They have no idea how talented you are." David was angrier than Marcus had ever seen him. "I should call the school. This is bullying," but Marcus shook his head. "It will just make things worse," he said quietly. Marcus was probably right. Getting parents involved would only give the other students more reasons to pick on him. So Sarah and David decided to let it go. Even though it was hard for them to watch their son suffer, the bullying was not just happening online. At school, students would whisper and point when Marcus walked by. Someone had stuck a note in his locker that said, "Real musicians only." Another day he found a printout of the competition rules taped to his desk. Someone had circled the part that said, "Performers should demonstrate professional level skill." Marcus tried to ignore it all. He went to his classes, ate his lunch alone, and came home to practice piano. But the comments were getting to him. When he sat down to play La Campanella, he could hear the other students' voices in his head. "Kids like him can't handle pressure. Real musicians only." His playing started to suffer. Notes that he had mastered weeks ago suddenly felt difficult again. His timing was off. His fingers stumbled over passages that used to feel easy. Mrs. Rodriguez noticed the change during his weekly lesson. "You seem distracted today," she said gently. "Is everything okay?" Marcus told her about what was happening at school. Mrs. Rodriguez listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Marcus," she finally said, "I have been teaching piano for 30 years. I have worked with students who went on to play at Carnegie Hall. I have never, and I mean never, had a student with your natural ability. Those kids at school don't understand music. They don't understand what you can do." Her words helped a little. But when Marcus went to school the next day, the comments continued. The worst part was that some adults seemed to agree with the students. At the grocery store, Marcus heard two women talking about the upcoming competition. One of them was Mrs. Patterson, whose daughter Emma was also competing. "It's really not fair," Mrs. Patterson was saying. "Emma has been taking lessons since she was 4. She practices 3 hours a day. Now she has to compete against kids who, kids who are different. It's not a level playing field," the other woman nodded. "I heard they're even doing a news story about it. About the boy with autism. It's like they're making it into some kind of feel-good story instead of a serious music competition." Marcus was standing just one aisle over with his mom. Sarah heard every word. She started to walk toward the women, but Marcus grabbed her arm. "Please don't," he whispered. "It will just make things worse." Sarah bit her tongue, but Marcus could see how angry she was. They finished their shopping in silence. The local news station did want to do a story. A reporter called the Chun family and asked if they could interview Marcus before the competition. The reporter said it would be an inspiring story about overcoming challenges. Marcus did not want to do the interview. He could already imagine what the students at school would say, but his parents thought it might be good for him. Maybe if people heard him talk about music, they would understand him better. The interview was scheduled for a Thursday after school. The reporter, a woman named Linda Walsh, came to their house with a camera crew. She asked Marcus to play a little bit of La Campanella while they filmed. Marcus tried his best, but having cameras and strangers in his living room made him nervous. His playing was not as smooth as usual. When the reporter asked him questions, he gave short answers and avoided looking at the camera. "Why did you choose such a difficult piece?" Linda asked. "I like it," Marcus said simply. "What do you hope to achieve in the competition?" "I want to play it well." The reporter seemed frustrated by his short answers. She had probably expected him to give inspiring speeches about following your dreams. But Marcus was not good with words. He was good with music. The news story aired 2 days later. Marcus watched it with his parents. The reporter had focused mostly on his autism diagnosis and how challenging it must be for him to compete. She spent only about 30 seconds showing him actually playing piano, the story made. Marcus sounded like he was entering the competition just to participate, not to win. It made it seem like his autism was the most interesting thing about him. Not his musical ability. At school on Monday, the teasing got even worse. Students had seen the news story and had new material to work with. "Did you see Marcus on TV?" one boy said loudly as Marcus walked past. "They made it sound like he's never seen a piano before." "I felt so bad for him," said a girl in a fake sympathetic voice. "He looked so confused during the interview." Marcus wanted to tell them that he had been nervous because of the cameras, not because he did not understand what was happening. He wanted to explain that he could play La Campanella better than anyone they knew. But he could not find the words. That afternoon, Marcus came home from school and went straight to his room. He did not want to practice piano. He did not want to think about the competition. He just wanted to hide. Sarah found him lying on his bed an hour later, staring at the ceiling. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "Do you want to quit the competition?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong there." Sarah sat down on the edge of his bed. "Marcus, listen to me. Those kids at school have never heard you play. They don't know what you can do. You belong in that competition more than anyone." But Marcus was not sure he believed her anymore. The voices of his classmates were getting louder than his mother's voice. They were getting louder than the music in his head for the first time. Since he had started learning La Campanella, Marcus wondered if he was making a terrible mistake. April arrived with spring rain and growing pressure. The state youth piano competition was only 6 weeks away. Marcus knew he should be excited, but instead he felt heavy inside, like a rock had settled in his stomach. The comments at school had not stopped. If anything, they had gotten worse. Someone had created a fake social media account called Marcus Chun Piano Fails and posted videos of other pianists making mistakes during performances. The account had dozens of followers. From his school. Marcus tried not to look at it, but sometimes he could not help himself. Late at night, when he should have been sleeping, he would scroll through the posts. Each one felt like a punch to his chest. His practice sessions were becoming harder. Marcus had always been able to lose himself in music. When he played piano, the rest of the world disappeared. But now, even at the piano, he could hear the voices of his classmates. Real musicians only. Kids like him can't handle pressure. He's going to embarrass himself. His fingers stumbled over sections of La Campanella that he used to play perfectly. The beautiful runs that had flowed like water now felt choppy and uncertain. The dramatic jumps that had thrilled him now made him nervous. Mrs. Rodriguez noticed the change immediately during his lesson. "Your technique is still perfect," she told him, "but something is different. You're holding back." Marcus stared at the piano keys. They looked the same as always, but they felt foreign under his fingers. "What if they're right?" he asked quietly. "What if I don't belong there?" Mrs. Rodriguez had been teaching for 30 years, but she had never heard such sadness in a student's voice. She sat down next to Marcus on the piano bench. "Tell me why you chose La Campanella," she said. Marcus thought for a moment. "Because it's beautiful, and because it's hard. And how does it make you feel when you play it well?" "Like I'm flying," Marcus said without hesitation. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. "That feeling is real. That's your gift. Don't let other people take that away from you," but it was easier said than done. At home, Marcus's parents watched him struggle. They saw him sitting at the piano for hours, playing the same passages over and over. They heard him getting frustrated and sometimes stopping in the middle of a piece. Sarah tried to help by bringing him snacks during practice. David tried to encourage him by telling him how proud they were. But nothing seemed to reach Marcus. He was trapped inside his own doubts. The worst day came in mid-April. Marcus was at his locker after school when Tyler Brooks and 2 other boys approached him. Tyler was holding his phone. "Hey, Marcus," Tyler said with a fake smile. "We found a video of a real pianist playing that song you're trying to learn. Want to see?" Before Marcus could answer, Tyler held up his phone. On the screen was a famous pianist performing La Campanella at a concert hall. The man's fingers moved like lightning across the keys. The music was perfect and powerful. This is what it's supposed to sound like, Tyler said. Think you can do that? Marcus watched the video in silence. The pianist was incredible. His technique was flawless. The audience was giving him a standing ovation. Maybe you should switch to an easier song, said one of Tyler's friends. Like Twinkle, Twinkle. Little star, that's more your speed. The boys laughed and walked away, leaving Marcus standing alone by his locker. He felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. That night, Marcus barely touched his dinner. He went to his room early and lay on his bed staring at the ceiling. When Sarah came to check on him, she found tears rolling down his cheeks. I can't do it, he whispered. I'm not good enough. Sarah's heart broke. She sat down next to her son and rubbed his back gently. Do you remember when you first started playing piano? She asked. You were 7 years old and you could barely reach the pedals? But you could play songs that took other kids years to learn, Marcus nodded slightly. And do you remember last Christmas when you played for Grandma and Grandpa? Grandpa cried. Because it was so beautiful. That was different, Marcus said. That was family. This is different. How is it different? Marcus was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, because now everyone is watching. And they're all waiting for me to fail. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. Not at Marcus, but at all the people who had made her son feel this way. Her kind, talented, hard-working son who deserved to be celebrated, not torn down. Marcus, she said firmly, I want you to listen to me. You are not entering this competition for Tyler Brooks or Jessica Martinez or anyone else at that school. You're entering it for you because you love music, because you have a gift, and because La Campanella makes you feel like you're flying. The next day was Saturday. Marcus usually practiced for 3 hours on Saturdays, but he could not bring himself to sit at the piano. Instead, he stayed in his room playing video games and trying not to think about the competition. David knocked on his door around noon. Want to take a drive? He asked. Marcus was not sure where they were going, but he needed to get out of the house. They drove in silence for about 20 minutes before David pulled into the parking lot of the community college. Where are we going? Marcus asked. You'll see, David said with a mysterious smile. They walked into the music building and down a long hallway. David stopped in front of a door marked Practice Room 7 inches and knocked. Come in, said a familiar voice. Mrs. Rodriguez was sitting at a beautiful grand piano. The room was small and windowless, but the piano was magnificent. It was black and shiny, much larger than any piano Marcus had ever played. I thought you might like to try playing La Campanella on a real concert grand, Mrs. Rodriguez said. This is the same type of piano they'll have at the competition. Marcus approached the piano slowly. The keys were perfectly white and black. The bench was the right height. When he pressed a key, the sound was rich and full in a way that his piano at home could never be. Go ahead, Mrs. Rodriguez encouraged. Play whatever you want. Marcus sat down and placed his hands on the keys. For a moment, he just sat there, feeling the weight of the keys under his fingers. Then, without thinking about it, he began to play. The opening notes of La Campanella filled the small room, but something was different. The piano responded to his touch in a way that felt magical. Every note was clear and bright. The difficult passages felt easier somehow. As Marcus played, he began to remember why he had fallen in love with this piece. It was not just about the technical challenge. It was about the way the music told a story. It was about the way it made him feel. He played the entire piece without stopping. When the last note faded away, the room was silent for a moment. That, said Mrs. Rodriguez, was beautiful. David had tears in his eyes. He had heard Marcus play this piece dozens of times at home, but never like this, never with such confidence and joy. How did it feel? Mrs. Rodriguez asked. Like flying, Marcus said, and for the first time in weeks he was smiling on the drive. Home, Marcus was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. He was not thinking about Tyler Brooks or the fake social media account or the news story that had made him look foolish. He was thinking about the music. That evening, Marcus sat down at his piano at home and played La Campanella from beginning to end. It was not perfect. The old piano could not match the sound of the concert grand, but it was good. It was really good. Sarah and David listened from the kitchen, not wanting to interrupt. They looked at each other and smiled. Their son was finding his way back to the music, but there were still 4 weeks until the competition. 4 weeks for doubt to creep back in. 4 weeks for the voices at school to get louder. 4 weeks for Marcus to decide whether he was brave enough to step onto that stage and show the world what he could do. As he played the final notes of the piece, Marcus made a decision. He was going to compete. Not for the people who doubted him and not to prove anything to his classmates. He was going to compete because music was his voice, and he deserved to be heard. The question was, would he be able to hold on to that feeling when it mattered most? May 15th arrived like a storm that Marcus had been watching approach for months. The state youth piano competition was being held at the downtown concert hall, a grand building with tall columns and marble floors that made every footstep echo. Marcus woke up at 6 in the morning, even though the competition did not start until 2 o'clock. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the piano on stage and hundreds of faces staring at him. Sarah made his favorite breakfast, pancakes with strawberries, but Marcus could only eat a few bites. His stomach felt twisted in knots. "You don't have to do this," David said gently, as Marcus pushed his food around his plate. "If you're not ready, we can leave right now." "No one would blame you." Marcus looked up at his father. For a moment, he wanted to say yes. He wanted to run back to his room and hide under his blankets. But then he thought about Mrs. Rodriguez and how proud she had looked when he played on the concert grand piano. He thought about the feeling of flying that La Campanella gave him. "I want to do it," he said quietly. "I'm scared, but I want to do it." The concert hall was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Young pianists were warming up in practice rooms. Parents were talking nervously in the lobby. Competition officials were checking names off lists and handing out programs. Marcus looked at the program and found his name. Marcus Chung, age 17, performing La Campanella by Franz Liszt. Seeing it in print made it feel real and terrifying. At the same time, he was scheduled to perform 15th out of 20 contestants. That meant he would have to wait for hours, listening to other pianists play while his nerves built up inside him. Mrs. Rodriguez met them in the lobby. She was wearing a dark blue dress and carrying a small bouquet of flowers for Marcus. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Nervous," Marcus admitted. "Good," she said, surprising him. "The best performers are always nervous. It means you care." They found seats in the auditorium so Marcus could watch some of the other contestants. The hall was bigger than Marcus had imagined. There were at least 300 seats, and most of them were full. The stage looked enormous under the bright lights. The first pianist was a girl about Marcus's age. She played a piece by Chopin with smooth, flowing movements. The audience clapped politely when she finished. The second pianist was a boy who looked younger than Marcus. He played Mozart with perfect technique, never missing a note. The audience clapped a little louder. As Marcus watched, he began to notice something. The other pianists were very good. They had clearly spent years studying and practicing. Their technique was clean and their timing was precise, but something was missing. "They're playing the notes perfectly," Marcus whispered to Mrs. Rodriguez. "But they're not telling a story," Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. "That's exactly right. Technical skill is important, but music is about more than just hitting the right keys." The competition continued. Some performances were better than others, but they all had the same quality that Marcus had noticed. They were correct, but not exciting. Safe, but not moving. Then Emma Patterson took the stage. She was the daughter of the woman Marcus had overheard at the grocery store. Emma was 18 and had been taking piano lessons since she was 4. Her piece was a difficult section from a Rachmaninoff concerto. Emma's performance was impressive. Her fingers flew across the keys with confidence. She never hesitated or stumbled. The audience gave her a strong round of applause, and several people stood up. "She's really good," Marcus said to his parents. "She is," Sarah agreed, "but so are you." Marcus was not so sure. Emma had looked so comfortable on stage, so confident. She belonged there in a way that Marcus was not sure he did. As more contestants performed, Marcus began to feel the familiar voices creeping back into his head. The voices of his classmates telling him he did not belong. The voice of Mrs. Patterson saying it was not fair for him to compete. The voice of his own doubt telling him he was about to embarrass himself in front of hundreds of people. Marcus. "Shun, you're up in 10 minutes, said a competition official. Marcus felt his chest tighten. His hands started to sweat. The sounds of the auditorium, people talking, programs rustling, chairs creaking, suddenly felt too loud. Mrs. Rodriguez noticed the change in his breathing. "Let's go find a quiet place," she said. They walked to a small practice room behind the stage. Mrs. Rodriguez closed the door, shutting out most of the noise from the auditorium. "I can't do this," Marcus said. His voice was shaky and small. "There are too many people. It's too loud. What if I forget the notes? What if I freeze up?" "Marcus, look at me," Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. Marcus lifted his eyes to meet hers. It was hard for him to make eye contact, but he forced himself to do it. "Do you remember the first time you played La Campanella for me? You were so excited you could barely sit still. You played it with such joy that I got goosebumps. The joy is still inside you. The music is still inside you. But what if I mess up? Then you mess up. So what? You're 17 years old and you're playing one of the most difficult pieces ever written. Even if you make mistakes, you're doing something amazing." Marcus took a deep breath. He could hear his name being called over the loudspeaker. "Time to go," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "Remember, you're not playing for the audience. You're not playing for the judges. You're playing for the music itself." They walked back toward the stage area. Marcus's parents were waiting for him. Sarah hugged him tightly. "We love you no matter what happens," she whispered in his ear. David squeezed his shoulder. "Go show them what you can do." Marcus stood in the wings of the stage, waiting for his introduction. He could see the piano under the bright lights. It was a beautiful black grand piano, even larger than the one he had practiced on at the community college. "Our next performer is Marcus Chun," announced the competition host. Marcus is 17 years old and will be performing La Campanella by Franz Liszt. There was a murmur from the audience. Marcus could hear people whispering. He knew. Some of them had come specifically to watch him, probably expecting him to fail. Marcus walked onto the stage. The lights were so bright he could barely see the audience, which was probably good. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him as he made his way to the piano. He sat down on the bench and adjusted his position. The piano keys looked perfect under the lights. He placed his hands in position for the opening notes and then stopped. The auditorium was completely silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. He could feel sweat on his forehead. For a moment that felt like forever, he just sat there. Then something happened. In the silence, Marcus heard something that was not really there. He heard the opening notes of La Campanella in his mind. Not the rushed, nervous version he had been playing lately, but the version that had made him fall in love with the piece. The version that made him feel like flying. Marcus pressed the first key. The note rang out clear and true in the silent hall. Then came the second note, and the third. Slowly, carefully, Marcus began to play. At first, he was still nervous. His fingers felt stiff and his timing was a little off. But as he moved into the flowing melody of the piece, something started to change. The music began to take over. The bright lights faded away. The watching audience disappeared. Even his own fear seemed to melt away. There was only Marcus and the piano and the most beautiful music he had ever played. His fingers found their rhythm. The difficult runs that had been stumbling blocks in practice now flowed like water. The dramatic jumps that had made him nervous now felt natural and exciting. Marcus was not just playing the notes anymore. He was telling the story that Liszt had written into the music. He was sharing the joy and the struggle and the triumph that lived inside La Campanella. The audience, which had been whispering when he first walked on stage, was now completely silent. Even the most experienced musicians in the hall had never heard a 17-year-old play Liszt with such skill and emotion. As Marcus moved into the final section of the piece, He felt that familiar sensation. He was flying. The music was carrying him higher and higher, and he never wanted to come down. The last notes of La Campanella rang out in the hushed auditorium. Marcus played the final chord and then sat perfectly still, his hands resting on the keys. For a moment there was complete silence, then the applause began. It started as a few scattered claps, but quickly grew into something Marcus had never heard before. People were not just clapping politely. They were standing up. They were cheering. Marcus looked out at the audience for the first time since he had started playing. People were on their feet, applauding wildly. Some were wiping tears from their eyes. In the front row, he could see Mrs. Rodriguez beaming. With pride, he found his parents in the crowd. Sarah was crying and clapping at the same time. David was standing with his hands over his heart, looking like he could not believe what he had just heard. The applause went on for what felt like forever. Marcus stood up and took a small bow, the way Mrs. Rodriguez had taught him. Then he walked off the stage, his legs feeling shaky, but his heart feeling light. As soon as he was off stage, Mrs. Rodriguez wrapped him in a huge hug. "That was incredible," she said. "That was the most beautiful performance I have ever heard." The remaining 5 performers took the stage after Marcus, but the energy in the auditorium had changed. People were still talking in hushed voices about what they had just heard. In the lobby during the break, Marcus overheard conversations. That made his heart race. "Did you hear that boy playlist?" An elderly woman was saying to her friend. "I've been coming to these competitions for 20 years and I've never heard anything like it." "He made it look so easy," said a man in a suit. "That piece usually sounds like a technical exercise. He made it sound like poetry." Marcus tried not to listen, but the comments kept reaching his ears. Some of the other young pianists were looking at him with new respect. Even Emma Patterson, who had played so beautifully earlier, came up to him during the break. "That was amazing," she said simply. "I've been trying to learn that piece for 2 years, and I can't even get through the first page." Marcus was not sure what to say. He had never been good at talking to other kids, especially ones he did not know well. But Emma seemed genuine, not mean like the students at his school. "Thank you," he managed to say. "I mean it," Emma continued. "My mom always tells me that technique is everything, but listening to you play, you made me remember why I started loving piano in the first place." After all the contestants had performed, everyone gathered in the auditorium for the awards ceremony. Marcus sat with his parents and Mrs. Rodriguez, trying not to think about the results. He had done what he came to do. He had played his best. The competition host walked onto the stage carrying a small envelope. Behind him, several adults in formal clothes, the judges, took their seats. "This year's competition was truly exceptional," the host began. "We heard 20 outstanding young musicians today, each bringing their own unique interpretation to classical music." Marcus felt his stomach flutter. He looked around the auditorium and saw that everyone was listening intently. "Before we announce the winner," the host continued, "the judges would like to present a special recognition award. This award is given to a performance that demonstrates exceptional artistry and emotional connection to the music." Marcus's palms started to sweat. A special award? He had never heard of such a thing. This year's special recognition award goes to Marcus Chun for his breathtaking performance of La Campanella by Franz Liszt. The auditorium erupted in applause. Marcus felt like he was in a dream. Mrs. Rodriguez was pushing him gently toward the aisle. "Go on," she whispered. "That's you." Marcus walked to the stage on unsteady legs. The host shook his hand and gave him a small trophy with a musical note on top. "Would you like to say anything?" the host asked, holding a microphone toward Marcus. Marcus looked out at the audience. All those faces that had seemed so scary before now looked friendly and encouraging. He thought about all the people who had told him he did not belong here. He thought about Tyler Brooks and the fake social media account and the news reporter who had made him sound helpless. "I just want to say thank you," Marcus said into the microphone. His voice was quiet, but in the silent auditorium everyone could hear him clearly. "Music is how I talk to the world. Thank you for listening." The applause was even louder this time. As Marcus walked back to his seat, He saw that many people in the audience were wiping their eyes, but the ceremony was not over yet. The host still had to announce the overall winner of the competition. And now for this year's State Youth Piano Competition champion... The host opened the envelope and paused for dramatic effect. Marcus Chun. For a moment, Marcus was not sure he had heard correctly. But then Mrs. Rodriguez was hugging him and his parents were cheering and the whole auditorium was on its feet again. Marcus walked back to the stage in a daze. The host placed a larger trophy in his hands and a medal around his neck. A photographer stepped forward to take pictures. As our champion, Marcus will receive a full scholarship to the summer music program at the State University, as well as the opportunity to perform with the City Symphony Orchestra next fall. The host announced. Marcus could barely process what he was hearing. A scholarship? A performance with a real orchestra? These were things he had never even dreamed of. After the ceremony, people kept coming up to Marcus and his family. Musicians, teachers, and parents wanted to congratulate him and ask about his training. A woman from the local newspaper, not the same reporter who had interviewed him before, asked if she could write a story about his victory. "This time, let's focus on the music," Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly, one of the judges. An older man with gray hair approached Marcus personally. "Young man," he said, "I've been judging piano competitions for 15 years. What you did up there today was special. You didn't just play the notes, you made us feel something. That's the mark of a true musician." The ride home was quiet, but it was a happy quiet. Marcus sat in the back seat, holding his 2 trophies and staring out the window. Everything looked the same as it had that morning, but somehow the world felt different. "I'm proud of you," Sarah said, turning around to look at her son. "We both are," David added. "Not just because you won, but because you were brave enough to try," Marcus nodded. He was proud of himself, too, in a way he had never felt before. The next Monday at school was like stepping into a different universe. Word about Marcus's victory had spread over the weekend. The local newspaper had run a front-page story with the headline, "Local teen wins state piano championship with stunning performance." Students who had never spoken to Marcus before were coming up to him in the hallways. Some wanted to congratulate him. Others just wanted to be able to say they knew the kid who had won the state competition. Tyler Brooks, who had been one of Marcus's biggest tormentors, actually approached him at lunch. "Hey, Marcus," Tyler said, looking uncomfortable. "I saw the video of your performance online. It was, really good." Marcus looked at Tyler carefully. He did not sense any meanness in his voice this time. "Thanks," Marcus said simply. "I'm sorry about, the stuff I said before. I didn't really understand." Marcus nodded. He was not sure he was ready to be friends with Tyler, but the apology felt genuine. The video Tyler had mentioned was everywhere. Someone had recorded Marcus's performance on their phone and posted it online. In just 3 days, it had been watched by over 1 million people. The comments were completely different from the ones on the fake account that had made fun of him. This gave me chills. I've never heard anything so beautiful. This kid is going to be famous someday. Thank you for reminding me why I love classical music. Mrs. Rodriguez showed Marcus some of the comments during his next lesson. She was beaming with pride as she scrolled through them. "Look at this one," she said. "It's from a music teacher in Japan. She's showing your video to her students as an example of what it means to really connect with music." Marcus was amazed. People all over the world had heard him play. His autism, which had always made him feel different and isolated, had not been an obstacle after all. It had been part of what made his music special. The summer music program that Marcus had won was at the State University, 2 hours away from home. For 6 weeks, he would study with some of the best piano teachers in the country. He would also get to work with young musicians from all over the state. Sarah and David were nervous about sending Marcus away from home for so long. He had never been away from them for more than a few days. But Marcus was excited. For the first time in his life, he would be surrounded by people who understood his passion for music. The night before he left for the program, Marcus sat at his old piano one more time. The same piano where he had first learned La Campanella. The same piano where he had struggled with doubt and fear. He played the piece one more time, from beginning to end. But this time he was not playing it for a competition or an audience. He was playing it for himself, for the pure joy of making. Music. As the last notes faded away, Marcus thought about how much his life had changed. A few months ago, he had been a lonely kid who ate lunch by himself and tried to be invisible. Now he was a state champion with a bright future ahead of him, but more than that, he had learned something important about himself. His autism did not make him less than other people. It made him different, and different could be extraordinary. When Marcus arrived at the summer music program, he was nervous but excited. The dormitory was full of young musicians from all over the state. Some played piano like Marcus, but others played violin, cello, flute, and instruments he had never seen before. At first, Marcus worried that he would not fit in. But he quickly discovered that musicians were different from regular kids. They understood what it felt like to lose yourself in music. They knew what it meant to practice for hours just to get a few measures perfect. On the first day of classes, Marcus's new teacher, Dr. Williams, asked him to play something for the other students. Marcus chose to play part of La Campanella. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then a girl who played violin started clapping, and soon everyone joined in. "That was beautiful," said Dr. Williams. "You have a very special gift. Marcus, this summer we're going to help you develop it even further.